But yeah, it was a really great opener, great sample, and a great beat from The Alchemist. Like you said, he really gave Benny a lot of heat on this project. Cole provides another stellar feature. Great bars. He said, I was counting this bread in mass like a Catholic preacher.
Woo.
As well as saying he would go to hell if Jesus asked him for a feature. So
Oh my
he was
gosh, you
just
stole it. I was gonna quote that too, man. That was one of the hardest bars I've heard, and probably is gonna go down as the hardest bar of the year.
yeah, it's tough considering his features, his history with features and stuff like that. I think it's really interesting.
Let me put you on game.
Let's get into our last topic of the day. Let's talk about music. Let's talk about Tana Talk 4 by Benny the Butcher. The Butcher coming. He uh he and the rest of Griselda, they drop projects at an alarming rate. They are constantly releasing music, which is one of the great appeals of their label, is that you're never really going to be starving for anything because they're going to continue to release quality projects year in and year out. And for me, I don't think Tana Talk 4 is any different. If you're not familiar with Benny, he is an MC from Buffalo, New York. He is from the Biggie Smalls, Pusha T rap tree of just rapping about coke day in and day out, but he does it really well. He's back with, we normally count the number of projects. Tana Talk 4 is a project in a long list of projects from Benny the Butcher. He's stepping back into the arena after releasing Tana Talk 3, which is one of his most acclaimed projects. He's released a couple projects since then with Burden of Proof and the Plugs I Met series, but this is his next offering. How are you feeling about Tana Talk 4, bro?
I understand the appeal, the Benny Butcher appeal. I think he paints really vivid portraits of his environment and his past, which really culminates in a documentary-like description of his world. And there's a line in this project where he says, "What did I bring to Griselda? Validity." That hit me in the soul. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it gave me flashbacks of the Clips and their coke slinging ways and their usage of double entendre, as Griselda, the label name, is also the shares the name of Griselda Blanco, aka the Godmother from Cocaine Cowboys 2, and her, Colombian drug lord exploits, running that from a California state penitentiary, and just all the efforts that she put in. And so I really enjoyed his usage of language in this LP, and what he was able to bring to the table. The production by the Alchemist and Derringer were just top notch. It really brought me back to that boom bap era of the mid to late '90s, and the gritty aesthetic of the drug gang that he's able to kind of describe from a very close perspective, and a perspective that isn't that common anymore, to be frank. A lot of what you hear nowadays is, drug usage, but he's talking about drug selling, and he's taking it back, and he's, educating these young rappers on the type of things that he's done in the past. So it blurs that line between reality as well as fantasy. And so it's interesting to see how much plausible deniability there is between these lines, and rappers alike, and just how much he's saying, yeah, I did this, but I didn't really do it. I don't know.
Yeah,
So
it does border between like really entertaining and also reprehensible, because the amount of like fentanyl lines on here just really made me like cringe a little. But I mean, that's part of the appeal in a way, but also kind of what the reality of it is, because it's kind of what we deal with in a lot of different communities. But it's it's interesting. It's certainly interesting. To get into the track list, he opens it up with Johnny P's Caddy. Johnny P, I believe, is his father. So just kind of taking it back to his childhood and his upbringing. But that song is super hard. I hadn't heard the single yet because I typically avoid singles. So my listening to the album was the first time that I heard it. But yeah, it was a really great opener, great sample, and a great beat from The Alchemist. Like you said, he really gave Benny a lot of heat on this project. Cole provides another stellar feature. Great bars. He said, I was counting this bread in mass like a Catholic preacher.
Oof.
As well as saying he would go to hell if Jesus asked him for a feature. So
Oh my
he
gosh, you
was
stole it. I was gonna quote that too, man. That's like one of the hardest raps. That was one of the hardest bars I've heard, and probably is gonna go down as the hardest bar of the year.
Yeah, it's tough considering his features, his history with features and stuff like that. I think it's really interesting. Back two times is dope. I love the bass on there. Stove God, I've heard a lot about him. I haven't really dived into his discography, but yeah, he had a real cool bar. He's driving sixes in that sun with the rocket. I think I'm Charles Barkley. Like that's just an elite level basketball rap bar. We appreciate it as a basketball music podcast for sure. Definitely taps into our sensibilities there. Super Plug, another dope track. I really love the piano. There's a really simple analog sounding drum loop that I think is really pleasing. I think Alchemist does a great job with the drums here on this album. Really classic bars from Benny about his come up and the risks that come with him being in the game. And then Weekend at the Perry's, really classic soul sample by Alchemist here. And I really enjoyed both the verses from him and from Boldy James as well, but a really strong opening to the album.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely my favorite stretch of the album. I would say these first 6 tracks. Johnny P's Caddy, Alchemist on the front end of this project was dynamite, man. Really dramatic beats, a lot of gravitas, and the production on this project, I feel like actually carried the project in a lot of ways. Where Benny isn't the sharpest tool melodically, the production elements kind of carry that melodic spirit in a lot of ways and give him a sound that is distinct and that is rhythmic, and that creates more interest around the words that he says, because melodically he isn't the strongest, but what he talks about and the realness of it and the authenticity, or the seeming authenticity of it, speaks volumes and allows his music to kind of really impact the listener. Back two times I thought was a great feature of Stove God in terms of him just adding that level of charisma that Benny sometimes misses in his tracks. And I appreciated the wordplay placed on his track with the hook and the performance of Stove God Cooks. Like he really brought something special to this song. Super Plug, yeah, Alchemist came with really cold piano keys in this song, as well as back two times. The pianos here and there were really strong. And Weekend at Perry's, just another incredible beat that the Alchemist created. The samples really created the lines that were taken from the source material, coupled with the gentle piano keys. Yeah, it was fire. Then 10 More Commandments. This was like when I heard this, it just immediately brought me back to the exorbitant amount of times that I listened to The Life After Death by Biggie. And I was appreciative of the fact that Benny kind of took this theme and ran with it. I thought Diddy being there on this song brought so much validity, and I really appreciated his presence. And the advice that he gave was really refreshing, and it was interesting to hear a 2022 version of the 10 Commandments and what kind of ideas would be kind of further fleshed out as well as expanded upon. And I thought Benny did a good job here, especially with the last one when he says, getting out the game being really important, as well as Diddy's outro saying that Black culture is the new commodity, and this is what we need to kind of export on a more holistic basis and show the world, instead of just continuing to stay in the drug trafficking game. But yeah, what was your, before I go on, what was your favorite of his 10 More Commandments?
Probably the social media one. I think that was really cool to update the crack commandments and like offer an expanded perspective of them, but also updating them for today's time, because I think a lot of people really get in trouble, not just with drugs, but with other things, as far as just sharing too much on social media and really just telling everyone like, hey, look, I have all of this, why don't you come take it from me? Whether you're talking about other people or the police. So just definitely moving in silence, I think, was a really valuable lesson to offer the listeners.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was really poignant, and something that really expanded on this whole concept. One of my favorites was 15, which chronicles buying things that can be liquidated ultimately, whether it's the cars and the jewelry. And I thought that that was a really thought-provoking point, because we often see the amount of excess and braggadocio that comes with buying cars that depreciate in value, as well as jewelry that don't seem to carry the value that they are priced with. But if you if you purchase those items in a strategic way, cars not so much, because they often depreciate in value, but especially jewelry, as long as you get something that's not too like outrageous, the material worth of those gold chains, of 24 karat gold and of diamonds, they kind of hold value. And if you're in a tough spot, or if you're in a bind, you can at least know that I can lean on that, because it's not like you can get a bank account with all that drug money. You know what I mean? Like you got to find somewhere to park all that cash. Some do it through laundering, and others do it through material items, which is kind of clever. And I'm kind of surprised that Pusha T didn't do this already, you know, with all the cocaine cowboy stuff that he be on. But then more so on Tyson versus Ali and Uncle Bun. The beat by Derringer was really solid and it was bright and engaging, but I just didn't connect the concept of this song to the verses. And I thought Conway's verse was really refreshing and charismatic, but Benny's just didn't offer enough to me to make this song as impactful as it should be. Like, if you're saying that you and Conway shouldn't really be compared to each other, and that it's like Tyson versus Ali, you know, Conway being Ali, and Benny the Butcher being Tyson. I like rappers kind of big upping themselves, but this one kind of fell flat, because I'm like, Tyson is one of the greatest of all time, and so is Ali, and you guys aren't there yet, even though you're fun and engaging and interesting to listen to. So, but then going into Uncle Bun, it was another really ice cold beat by Derringer, and I like the back and forth between Benny and 38 Special, and it felt authentic to me. But yeah, how was this stretch for you?
I like the stretch actually. I like Tyson versus Ali. I think the cascading production on the background was really beautiful. And I like the idea of them celebrating both of their greatness rather than competing, because I think that with Griselda, they're not necessarily the biggest group. Like, you know, our moms don't know who Griselda are, but in terms of their lane, I think that they're dominating it right now. I think that they're one of the most distinct, and right now one of the most celebrated rap collectives out there, based just strictly on their lane. They're not quite in the Grammy winning, you know, E-News lane, or, you know, the Coachella lane quite yet, but just in terms of where they sit in the context of rap and the respect that they have, I think that they're in the best spot that they could be in their particular lane. Whether they switch lanes and they ascend, I mean, we'll see. But I do think that they have a really important place in rap. So I see the analogy, because I think Tyson versus Ali in rap right now is like Drake and Kendrick. You know what I mean? But like in their lane for what they are, I think that Tyson Ali analogy is appropriate for their particular box. So I think them just acknowledging that, like, yeah, we do these things really well, but we don't necessarily have to compete. We can acknowledge each other's greatness without you know, putting a damper on it. Uncle Bun I thought was cool. I like the cool homage to Bun B. Definitely a bar fest for sure. He's 38 Special is really charismatic on there. He said, "I got 2 clips. That's enough for you and your alter ego." I thought that was dope. Yeah. Always Revenge. I thought that was a really nice change of pace and had a really nice bounce. It's not production that you would expect to come from Alchemist, really, or production that you would expect to hear Benny the Butcher on, but I really like the horns. Really great bars about Benny and his come up. And then that goes into Billy Joe. I thought that that was really a very interesting song in terms of how there were these really eerie vocal harmonies that worked really well with Benny's bars about the darkness of the game and kind of person that you have to be morally to survive. It's kind of the Biggie Smalls thing where it's like, you know, yeah, he'll sell crack to a pregnant woman because if she don't get it from me, she'll get it from somebody else. It's like he's talking about selling to his family members, which is really dark and really like the reprehensible part that I was talking about in the whole, like, you got to really compromise a lot of moral ground to really be engaged in this kind of stuff. So it's like, yeah, it's appealing to listen to, but at the end of the day, you kind of got to sit back and like listen, like, wow, like, oh man, like that's a really shitty thing to do to engage in that on that level. But he's being honest about what his upbringing is and what he had to go through to get to this point. So it's a that compiled with the type of production on that song, I thought really worked well. So shout out to him and shout out to Alchemist for that one. Guerrero, I thought was really cool because I like West Side Gun and his charisma. He always brings like a lot of zany energy to every track that he's on. They make a really unique combination. Bust a Brick Nick, I thought was cool. Not the most standout track to me personally. Cool bars though for sure. Benny said, "Next time you sneak this me, pay me, I'll write the hook." I thought that was dope. And then Mr. Chow Hall, that one I think is more of a track that fits better in the middle of an album, not necessarily as a closer. It kind of rang a little bit. I don't know what the word is, but it didn't really close the album like I would like the album to be closed as far as the sound of the album. So it didn't necessarily hit home for me as a close, but as a track, it's okay. So the last couple songs I thought were okay, but overall, the album itself I thought was a really solid offering from Benny. What about you?
Yeah. I feel like, Thoe's Revenge was really, for me, at least, the last part of the project that I enjoyed a lot. I thought that the triumphant beat and the horns on that song were really, really stood out. And Alchemist created a nice production, melodic soundscape that Benny actually was able to become more melodic and kind of ride that wave in a nice way. Billy Joel, you just really don't hear production like this anymore, and you don't hear this type of production, at least in the mainstream, anymore. And so it was really nice to hear this kind of sound. It really just brought me back to my childhood, like I was mentioning before. But I also thought that during this last stretch, the production was good, but the conceptual rapping and the stories that Benny was telling kind of started to ring a little hollow and just sound a bit repetitive without some of the same elements that were present in the beginning of the project in terms of just the novelty of the different sounds. I thought West Side Gun's performance on Guerrero left a lot to be desired. I love his sound and I love his charisma, but I would like to see him used more in spot performances, similar to the way that Kanye used him on Donda, where it's like he comes in here, comes in there, but he doesn't have to carry a whole verse because his verse just didn't end well for me, and it didn't have the cohesiveness that I was looking for on Guerrero. Bust a Brick, I thought was a nice, kind of 36, 48 bar song that just had Benny just talking his talk. But besides that, it wasn't that memorable. And I definitely get your feelings on Mr. Child Hall. Again, Alchemist crafted another really dope sound that Benny could talk his truth from. But as far as the outro goes, you want to hear a little bit more musicality, a little bit more melody, something a bit more memorable to kind of leave your audience wanting more. But overall, I thought he did his thing on this project, and yeah.
Yeah, it's an uneven project overall, but it still has its moments. How are you feeling as far as favorite tracks?
For me, I would go Thoe's Revenge, 10 More Commandments, and Johnny P's Caddy.
I feel you. Yeah, it's Johnny P's Caddy has to be on the list for sure. I think that's a hell of a single from them. I would definitely go 10 More Commandments as well. Um, Give me Billy Joe. I like that one a lot. Um, if you had to recommend this to our listeners on a scale of must listen to hard pass or vice versa, what would you say?
I've been definitely waffling with this.
Yeah.
So what I think separates him from the same echelon as Eclipse, Hove, Biggie, and other dealers turned rappers is his ear for musicality and his melodic presence. I think he's still growing as an artist in a lot of ways, despite him being on the older side of up and coming artists at 37. As interesting as the stories that he tells are, I think it can make for a stale sound that kind of blends together from track to track, if not for the really dope production that he gets paired with. And it kind of pains me to say, but I don't know if this is a project that I really see myself going back to. And there's not much experimentally that he does that stands out that I really kind of that I could really sink my teeth into. The most experimental and creative that he got was with songs like 10 More Commandments, as well as Back Two Times, with Stove God. And so I feel like because of that, I don't know. Right now, I gotta say that you ain't missing much. Um,
Ooh.
even though there's, and it pains me to say that because there's a lot that I like on this project, but there's just not enough that I would say to somebody, yeah, that's definitely a project you should check out. There's a song here and there that I think someone should check out, but overall, I think you can skip a lot of this project.
Yeah, I waffled a little bit, but not between the ratings that you were waffling between. I thought we were on the same page there for a second. That's why I said ooh, because I was surprised. But I guess I would say I wouldn't recommend it to someone who's more into like popular rap. But I think that if you like this style of rap, if you like boom bap, if you like um Alchemist and his type of production, or the production of a Ninth Wonder, or the production of a Mad Lib, like even though those producers are all incredibly different, but just that lane of quote unquote underground hip hop, I think that Benny might have something to offer you. So I would highly recommend for that kind of person, because I think that you have to be in that kind of mindset to enjoy it. I don't think it's for everyone, but I do think that if you enjoy that style of hip hop, I think this album is a good offering in that regard. He has other albums that I think I would recommend more highly, because I think this album is on the lower end of highly recommend for me. I think it's just above give it a shot, but I think it's on the lower end of highly recommend. But like, uh, I think Burden of Proof is an album that I would recommend more so to the uh, more casual hip hop listener, because the production is by Hit Boy. It's a lot more accessible. It's a lot more dynamic in terms of the different kinds of production on there. So it's a little bit more of a quote unquote exciting listen. It's honestly a project that I'd enjoy a little bit more than this one. It's Burden of Proof is up there with the plugs I met as far as my favorite Benny projects. But yeah, it's a tough album to kind of quantify, but that's where I sit with it. But I still think it's an enjoyable listen. I still think Griselda has a lot to offer uh, the listeners that they have. They're going to continue to drop projects at a really rapid rate, and I think people are going to eat it up. And I'm excited to see what they do as a rap collective as they grow.
Yeah, definitely. Overall, I like what their group does. I think that they are fun, and I think that they are a force to be reckoned with in the game right now. So, yeah, I continue to support them and their lane, and I will listen to their music. Just for me, it just didn't land as I really wanted to like it, but the flaws that it had, just I couldn't really get over personally.
I hear you. Um, But that'll do it for our review of Tana Talk 4 by Benny the Butcher. Let us know if you're listening through an email what you thought about the album, if you thought we were a little bit off base. And if you're watching, let us know what you thought in the comments. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and let us know what you thought about Tana Talk 4 and how you feel about the album. Is it one of Benny's best works, or is it more towards the bottom end of his discography? Uh, Hit us up.